If you've ever drank water from a jerry can, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Guys, like and comment. Tell a story about drinking from a jerry can. One time we did, and we got to the bottom of it after about a week in the field, and there was a dead rat at the bottom that haunts me to this day, and that is a perfect picture of what the military is like. Guys, if you are looking to support the channel, the biggest support of the channel right now is Big Daddy Unlimited. Big Daddy Unlimited is like the Costco of the gun world, 99 cents for the first month. After that, price goes up. Is it worth it to buy products, yes or no? They are also the proud sponsor of my range. I'm not sure what to call it yet. It's either gonna be Big Range Energy or Range 69. Nice. Not sure, but a big thank you to them. Of course, we have Vortex and LEX ammunition for your plaid, gloves, and of course your ammunition needs. Discount code GRANTHAM. Ladies, gentlemen, and my often forgotten, but not by me, M777s, welcome to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about a pretty cool optic, and that is going to be the Vortex UH-1 Gen 2, affectionately known as the Huey. So, if you're familiar, I did a review on the Gen 1 about 2 years ago now in 2018, and actually this is the exact same upper, different muzzle device now, that I used for that video. So I thought it would be fitting to use this same upper again. This is an SR16 from Knights Armament. Great upper, just goes to show you that good uppers don't really age, they're just always good. The rail is a little bit dated, but it still feels good and it still looks sexier than anything else out there on the market right now. So, before we get into the review on the UH-1 Gen 2, I want to do a full disclosure, which is what I typically do, and that is what is my relationship with the company, all that kind of stuff. It's important to me that I'm transparent to you guys before I do any of my reviews. So the people at Vortex I've known for a very long time. I've done a lot of shoots with them. I've hung out with them quite a bit, both at SHOT Show and outside of SHOT Show. I like them. I would consider them my friends, and I think that they make great products time and time again. So understand that there is that relationship there. As far as what was done for the review, they simply sent me the optic. The optic is mine to keep. There was no exchange of money, no exchange of ammunition. Ammunition is provided for by Big Daddy Unlimited. Big thank you to them. So just understand all of that going into the review. I will be as unbiased as possible. A very similar setup with LWRC, but as you know, I am very honest in my reviews. So with those things being said, let's get into the optic. Now, unfortunately for my Navy guys out there, we can't go tip to butt, so we're just gonna go ahead and just grasp the whole thing and talk about it. So there are advantages on holographic sights versus red dots. We'll talk about those at the end, but obviously if we're going to do a review on the UH-1 Gen 2, we have to compare it to the Eotech EXPS 3-0. That is its most closest competitor in my mind. And so we'll be doing a lot of our comparisons versus the Eotech. I feel that it is a fair comparison. Understand that the Eotech EXPS 3, long after its release, still goes around $650 or so. So it is an expensive, well, it's an expensive optic. The UH-1 street price is currently around $499, so it definitely is cheaper. So the question is does it perform? Does it beat the Eotech? Let's get into it. So the first time you see the UH-1, you look at it and you're like, this is a box. This doesn't have a lot of form. Aaron Cowan from Sage Dynamics famously said that this had those Fallout type aesthetics, and I kind of like that image, that it's got that Fallout type look. But in any case, it's not really that large. I look at it, I'm like, this is a large optic with an O, but when you compare it directly with the Eotech, you can see that they're actually the same length and width. It's just that unlike the EXPS, the UH-1, the hood extends all the way out there. It's all about that hood life. So understand that's why it looks larger. It of course does weigh more. Does it matter? I mean, if we're talking about weight, yeah, absolutely. Like, it definitely weighs more, so it's something to be noted against it. But that being said, let's kind of get a little bit further into this and see what else matters here. The first thing I'm going to look at when I look at an optic is to make sure it has a good mount. Now, in the case of the EXPS and the UH-1, you cannot swap the mounts. So unlike a red dot, say a Aimpoint T2 or Comp M5, where you can change the height, That is not the case with many of these holographic optics out there. Now, there are great risers out there from Unity Tactical to get those up to the kind of NVG level, so it's not really that big of a concern, but understand what mount you have is what you're gonna have. So it's important that they have a solid, rock steady mount. Now, in the case of the UH-1, it has a very rock steady mount. It's perfect. I've had no shift in zero the entire time that I've used it. So I can't say enough good things about what they've done with the mount. Get on them there. That's a good foundation, literally, for the optic. So one thing that I love about the UH-1 compared to the Eotech is the battery compartment. So with the Eotech, you kind of have to get your fingers on there and get a flat head and unscrew it. With this, there's a little piece of plastic right here that you can flip out, and then you can simply unscrew it. So it's much more handy than the Eotech, in my opinion. And also, if you're turbo retarded or in the Army, it also gives you which way the battery is oriented. And when you flip out that piece of plastic, it tells you what battery, CR123A, which is pretty common among holographic type reticles. So good on them there. On the opposite side right here, we can see that we have the windage and elevation. They are half MOA adjustments, which is exactly what the Eotech has. I do like how recessed they are. They've done a really good job. In fact, if you kind of look through the entirety of the optic, you'll notice they have a lot of lightning cuts, and by that I mean cuts to reduce the weight compared to the older Gen 1 UH-1. So they did a lot of good things there. And also, something that takes time is that they really spent their time doing the machining, smoothing everything out and making sure that it has a good uniform finish. I can definitely appreciate the amount of machining that it takes to make it look as good as it does right here. So big props to Vortex on doing all of that. One thing that Vortex did get rid of is the USB port. So on the Gen 1, there is a USB port, and you could, if you had a rechargeable battery, you could plug in a USB and recharge that thing. I don't think anybody ever used it. Maybe a couple people did, but it seemed pretty impractical. And so they got rid of it and probably saved weight, and durability is less complex. So I like that they did that. I didn't think that it was completely necessary. As far as the battery life is concerned, that's always an issue with holographic reticles, right? Holographic weapon sights have less battery life than aim points. That's just the way it is. I do believe that holographic reticles are worth it in other ways, and we'll talk about those in just a little bit. But the battery life on the UH-1 is around 1,500 hours at level 7. So you go above that, you're gonna get a little bit less. On the Eotech, you're looking at about 1,000. So you do have a better battery life, and they did it in certain ways to get that better battery life, and we'll talk about that here going into it. So before we get into precisely how they get so much battery life out of the UH-1, let's talk a little bit about window size, because that is one of the big comparisons between the Eotech and the UH-1. So they actually have about the same window size, which is a little bit deceptive, because although they do have the same window size, the UH-1 lacks that outer covering that the Eotech has. So although the window size is similar, the UH-1 is vastly more pleasing to look through because you don't have a lot of that extra excess on the outsides. Because of that, your field of view is much improved, in my opinion. So you can see right here in this video, comparing the two, that the window sizes are very similar. The reticle brightness, all that. The reticles look the same. I mean, you know, different reticle, but as far as the appearance, the same. But due to the lack of the shroud around the UH-1, you have a much more pleasing sight picture, in my opinion. Now, another thing that you probably noticed while looking through that is that the UH-1 has a noticeable blue tint to it compared to the Eotech. We'll go ahead and show that one more time just so you can kind of take a look at it. So there definitely is a blue tint to the UH-1 compared to the Eotech, and that's one of the ways that they've saved battery life. Has to do with the type of coatings that they used. So yes, there is a blue tint. Honestly, I haven't noticed it in all the shooting that I've done with the UH-1. And by the way, at this point, that's actually been about 10,000 rounds. So I put a crazy amount of rounds through weapons with this particular optic mounted. So as far as the tint is concerned, it's something that I really haven't noticed. You can kind of focus on and get a little bit obsessed, but when I'm shooting both of them, it's something that really doesn't play into it. You kind of see the same thing with those older T1s. And again, it's just not something that gets to me. It might bother you. You'll have to kind of look through it to see if it's an issue for you, but for me, it is not. Now, another important part about holographic optics is forward-facing emissions. That is, if somebody is looking at you through your optic, through the muzzle side, so if I'm bringing my weapon up onto somebody and I have my optic on, the question is, is, are they going to see the reticle emissions? And you might wonder why this matters, and we'll talk about that in a second. With the UH-1, it has one of the lowest signatures of forward emissions that I've ever seen. So they've done an excellent job on those forward emissions. Now the Eotech is also good, but not as good. So the point being is that why it matters is there are many occasions where you may be going from a bright, it's bright outside, and then you walk into a darkened building. And during that time, you're not able to adjust your optic. And as you're coming in, those forward-facing emissions could definitely be a problem until you're able to dial down the brightness settings and multiple other things as well. In dark areas where you have to have it on at some setting, it might possibly give you away. So are forward-facing emissions a big deal? Honestly, I'd rather not have them. So not that big of a deal, but it is definitely a nice feature that you have on the UH-1. Now, speaking of kind of the internals a little bit, one thing that has plagued several holographic sites has been thermal drift. This is as the optic heats up or cools down. Where that reticle is actually pointing is not where you originally zeroed it, and that's due to expansion and contraction of various little parts within the optic. So when that whole deal went down with Eotech is when Vortex was designing the Gen 2. So just like on a LCAN, the windage and elevation is in the mount and is not on the laser itself that is emitting the reticle. Because of that, you have very, very little thermal drift compared to other optics out there. Again, this is a feature that I very much so appreciate. They did their homework when they're doing this, and that is something that is very forward thinking, so good on them for that. A couple ways that they've helped to cut down on the energy usage is they use a less powerful laser. This is due to the lens coatings that they have, and they also use a different refresh rate than the Eotech. So as far as the laser is concerned, being a lesser class laser, that's not that big of a deal because it just saves money and they use a different lens coating. Now with the refresh rate, it can possibly be a problem. So I did run into the issue once, is when I was shooting from a very bright area into a very shadowed area with the reticle turned up. When I was firing, because of the refresh rate, as the weapon was recoiling, I could see the very slight shadow of that reticle due to the refresh rate at the bottom of the optic as I fired. Was it that big of a deal? No, because again, I can still see with the actual reticles because that one is very bright compared to the shadow of the reticle going low from the kind of slower refresh rate. But it is something to be aware of. Now, when it comes to night vision on the UH-1, I've seen a lot of very damning pictures showing that the UH-1 had a very poor light transmission compared to the Eotech. So that was important to me. With the new Gen 2 UH-1, they incorporated a night vision mode, and if you can't look through and see your target, then that's not going to matter much. So I did go out with this several times and look at them under night vision between both the Eotech and the UH-1. I used a Because Operator mission recorder to record through my PVS-31 alphas, which are SOCOM spec tubes. They are unfilmed white phosphor, to show you what I've seen when I look through them. Now, I do want to point out that the other pictures that I have seen that show the poor performance from the UH-1 are more than likely absolutely true. I'm sure that given the lighting conditions and that type of stuff and the type of night vision that they were using, those were the exact images that they saw. So I'm in no way discrediting those people. I'm simply showing my own personal experiences from the particular set of nods that I own. So as you can see in this video right here, we're going to pop it up right now. When I'm outdoors, a little bit of ambient light, primarily starlight, a couple street lights out, the light transmission between the Eotech and the UH-1 are fairly similar. There is slightly less with UH-1. I'll be very quick to point that out. However, as a whole, I have no problem with target ID and identification, positive ID, all that kind of stuff when I'm looking through either optic. The reticle on both of them looks exactly the same. And that was something that I was wondering about given the slightly slower refresh on the UH-1. However, it did not at all present an issue under night vision. So I'm glad that it presented that issue. Now, indoors with very little light, about the same. Both the Eotech and the UH-1 seem to perform very similar. The only place where the UH-1 did perform worse, and which is very curious, is that if I used any type of IR light, so like an IR flood off a B.E. Myers Mall in this video, or a PEC or something like that, the light coatings on the UH-1 do not allow for that IR light to come through as well as they do on the Eotech. So if you're going to be using a flood or anything like that off an IR source while looking through the optic, the Eotech is superior in that concern. But besides that, if you're simply going to be shooting through your optic without any type of IR light source, which is what a lot of people are tending to do when they're shooting through the optic. They're doing it so they can reduce their IR signature at night in case you have other people with nods out there looking to hunt you as well, then it's not going to be a problem. But based on my tests, if you are going to be using an IR flood while looking through, then it could be an issue. And again, I don't really see that being a tactic being used. If you're going to use your IR flood, you're likely using your IR laser as well, in which case you're going to be aiming via the laser, in which case it doesn't really matter so much. But those are my results. I don't really see much of a difference between the two when I'm looking through them under night vision. You can see the video right here. And those are my kind of conclusions about it. Now, beyond that, to go into night vision mode on the UH-1, it's a little bit different than the Eotech. So on the UH-1, you have the two side buttons right there, and then of course we have the center button that says night vision. So to get it to go into night vision mode, you have to depress that for about a second. With the Eotech, the minute you touch that button, it goes directly to night vision mode. I kind of enjoy the UH-1 with the kind of more deliberate press on the night vision to get it to change. That's me personally. Now, while we're on the topic of buttons right here, I kind of do prefer the buttons being on the side like they are on the Eotech. And the reason for that is when I have any type of magnifier behind the optic, it is kind of hard to get to the buttons to adjust it with that magnifier in front. So having those buttons on the side might be something that I would change to in the future, but it's honestly just me nitpicking at this point. Durability. So durability is something that is harder to quantify. I've dropped this thing, I've thrown it off rocks, off cliffs, it's fallen, it's gotten bumped. I haven't had any problems with the glass cracking or loss of zero or anything like that. I would say it's definitely on par with the Eotech, and the Eotech is a very tough optic. But the thing about it is that the Gen 2 doesn't yet have the track record that the Eotech has. So time will tell on that, because unfortunately I just have a sample size of 1. And although I put many rounds on it and this optic has gotten very hot, again, I'm just one guy. So I'm going to say that it is a tough optic from everything that I have seen, but again, time will tell. The Gen 1 was a very tough optic as well. On top of that, Vortex does have a lifetime guarantee, so it's not that big of a deal, but understand that to me, this is definitely a tough, ready optic for duty use and all that type of stuff. All right, so we've avoided it, but we have reticle. So the reticle on the Vortex UH-1 is very cool. I've done a lot of shooting from helicopters with this reticle, a lot of shooting on the move, from cars, all that type of stuff. And this reticle is excellent. So we're gonna pop it up right here. I'm gonna kind of point it out, but you basically have an Eotech that has some bites taken out of it. So the Eotech is the donut of death. The Vortex is like the 3 bites Eotech. But what you have going on is it's pretty cool. So first off, the gaps allow for not as much target obstruction as you would have with a full circle. So I'm definitely all about that. The ring on the outside is about 65 MOA. The dot in the center is 1 MOA, and then you have a triangle at the bottom. So couple things here. So when you're doing a standard kind of 50, 200 yard zero, so 50 yards / 200 yards, the center dot is perfect. What that bottom triangle does is that bottom triangle is for close engagements at 10 yards. So at 10 yards, you're gonna put that triangle center mass, and that's where your rounds are gonna land. And that's due to height over bore. So I do like that reticle design quite a bit. And also in CQB, or even at further distances, just like with the Eotech, if you put that circle of death over whatever you need to shoot and you pull the trigger and it's about center with that circle, you're probably gonna make your hit. Holographic reticles are incredibly fast. And that is one reason that they are, is that the reticles are a little bit more varied, and because of that, you can be very fast with them. So I definitely like the reticle on the UH-1. It is the EBR CQB. That's a long name. Point is, half-eaten donut of death, it rocks. They've done a great job with the reticle, and I can't recommend it enough. Now, as a battery-saving feature on top of what they've already done, the UH-1 does have a 14-hour shutoff. Now, everyone freaks out about the 14-hour shutoff. That is, if you press the button once and you don't press it again for 14 hours, it will shut off. If you are using this for work or anything like that, more than likely, you're going to adjust the brightness at some point, and that resets the 14-hour shutoff. So don't freak out. Also, if you want to, you can also turn it off by simply holding the minus sign. It's gonna blink. Auto shut off is off. So, and you can turn it back on with the plus sign. Not a big deal. I like the auto shut off. I think it's a good feature, something that I appreciate because again, if I'm using this for work, I'm gonna be constantly adjusting that illumination as I'm going to changing illumination levels. Certainly within 14 hours, daylight is gonna change and I'm gonna need to dial up or dial down my intensity. So it's not that big of a deal for me. Now I've avoided it for a little bit, but I mentioned that holographic sights do have some advantages over red dots. Depending on the severity of the astigmatism that you have, and you're looking through a red dot sight, you might probably see some starbursting. Again, depending on the severity, with holographic sights, that can often be a lot less worse. A lot of people with astigmatisms can use holographic reticles with no problem. Now, again, that's gonna be something that you're going to need to try out to see if it works for you. As a quick note, that is one cool thing. Another great thing is that under magnification, the holographic reticles will remain the same size. Dots increase in size as you zoom in on them. Holographic reticles will always remain the same size that they're projected at. So if I put a 3x behind it, when I look through it, I'm still gonna see a 1 MOA dot in the target. So the target will be bigger, but my dot and reticle will still be the same size. That is good for precise shooting, and it is one thing that I've always loved about holographic reticles. Beyond that, for me personally, I find that holographic reticles are easier for me to use. They're easier for my mind, all that type of thing, for me to pick them up, and that it is for most people. I still do consider holographic sights to be kind of the king of CQB. Now in this case, I am using the Eotech magnifier. I don't have a lot of time on the Vortex magnifier, so I'm not really using it that much, but the Eotech magnifier works great on here. As far as the height of the UH-1, it is a lower 1/3 co-witness. That is precisely what I want because it allows me to have a pretty good upright head position, and that works pretty well for me. And again, if you need to rise it, Unity riser, and that kind of finishes it out for the Vortex UH-1. So final thoughts. What do I think of the UH-1? Over the 8,000 or so rounds that I put on the UH-1 through various different firearms, I've come to really love the UH-1. In every single way, I recommend this optic. It is a well-built, well-engineered optic, and Vortex has once again knocked it out of the park. It is hard for a company to consistently come out with great products, but time and time again, Vortex does a great job with their optics, and that is absolutely the case with the UH-1, especially at the price point they're offering it at, being that it's a direct competitor to the EXPS 3-0. So a big congratulations to Vortex. I think they've done a phenomenal job with this optic. In certain ways, the Eotech is better, like the ways we talked about, but in other ways, the UH-1 is superior. If money is an issue, I absolutely think that the UH-1 is a great buy. But the fact of the matter is that whether you have the UH-1 Gen 2 or you have an EXPS 2-0, you're likely, I'm not gonna recommend that you upgrade from an Eotech to UH-1. They're very similar. Now, if you're about to get into the game, absolutely the UH-1. Otherwise, hold on to your Eotech. It is still a phenomenal optic that is combat tested probably just about as much as any other optic out there except the ACOG. You cannot go wrong with the Eotech either. Both are phenomenal optics. But here's the thing. No matter what optic you use, the UH-1, the Eotech, the ACOG, burst, fast fire, whatever you might use, it's not going to matter unless you get training. So get training. Tons of great guys out there to get training from. We have Cogworks, Bear Solutions, Haley Strategic, who is maybe my dad. We have Tony Cowden, tons of great guys out there. Highly recommended to check them out. Of course, Fieldcraft Survival, I can't forget my favorite people. But get that training, make yourself the weapon. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for watching. I appreciate you guys so much, and I've got nothing else for you. So there is a large problem in not just this community, but every community with constructive criticism. The minute somebody makes a product or does something training-wise or does anything that is not in line with what everyone knows to be kind of the normal thing, then the immediate response is to destroy this person absolutely with zero remorse. And that's not the way a community should be handling itself. And we should be lifting each other up. You should be a man about it, be polite, be courteous, and help this person improve. That is how communities get better. Get better at giving constructive criticism. Not stuff that's just your product fucking sucked or you fucking suck, but how to get better in a nice way, and don't do it publicly. There's a lot to be said for handling things privately. Usually it's taken a lot better, and it's the general way that I handle criticism with people when I'm helping people out. Because doing it online, you're just doing it for clout. You know, doing it publicly, you're just doing it for clout. Say, oh, I know more than this person. Be nice. Let's build each other up. Stay safe out there, kings. Guys, you know, if you've gotten this far, then I'm going to rep Survival Dispatch. Survival Dispatch is a subscription site for survival skills. These are skills that we have forgotten in today's day and age because we don't use them anymore. We don't need to know how to start fires or, you know, catch rabbits and all that kind of stuff, but it is vitally important in certain situations, and those certain situations mean the difference between life and death. As a former survival guy, I absolutely recommend it. My final note is, of course, to my favorite people out there, my Patreon members. Guys, thank you so much for all of the support that you've given me. Your support has directly made this channel what it is today, and there are no amount of words that I can ever say or put together that can express how grateful I am for everything that you have done for me. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. You guys absolutely rock. Take care, guys. Love you all. Stay tuned. Tons more coming. My kid's due in like a day, so understand if I might be delayed getting back to you. Love you guys. Take care.